the surgeon, the nurse, and a third chair reserved for you. Welcome to the third chair.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Well, this will be our very first podcast. So I guess ladies first, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm the nurse. That is my voice in the intro video, if any of you in the audience have seen that yet.
And I'm her brother. I'm the neurosurgeon. I'm a father of two, but I have raised a lot of kids over the years. And actually, my sister and I were once just talking on the telephone, and after we talked for several days over a period of several weeks, we came to a realization that there really isn't a podcast out there that discusses a lot of day-to-day things that we experience that not just have a not necessarily just from the religious perspective, but also from a cultural perspective, from a social perspective, just general life in in general, like things that we thought were important would be kind of not just fun, but hopefully helpful for anybody in our audience, which is you, the third chair.
Yes, and mm, I'm going to add that I'm one of those kids that he helped raise. So we are really excited to get started on our first pilot episode. I think we agreed on the topic, but um, I don't know. What do you think? Are we going to go with talking about parents?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because when you and I were talking, it brought up a lot of emotions in me, right? I, I was comparing, I guess, in my own head, how it is now being a father of two and how it was essentially raising my siblings and not just my siblings, but even at one point I had some nieces and nephews I was taking care of. And also over the years, like I've had residents come in and, when residents come in, they're almost like your children when you're trying to teach them and you're trying to educate them. And then I thought about my own childhood, and then I thought about your guys' childhood before I started raising you, um, and it made me think of a lot of positives, and it also made me think of some of the negatives. And I guess I just wanted to get your thought on that. What is your thought? I mean, especially now that you're obviously an amazing mother, but being a
Oh,
mom now yourself, I wanted to hear your input, and we can kind of talk about it.
thank you. Thank you. I wouldn't say amazing mother, but I'm definitely doing my best. And I think that's the whole point of parenting, right? You grow up and you realize, I really did my best and that's all we can do. I think that there's not only generational differences in parenting, but there's also cultural differences. So, to our viewers that might relate to those cultural differences, aka Al Hazam, just kidding. So, so yeah, I think it's an important topic.
Yeah,
I
so it's
think that,
funny that you say that,
yeah.
and I actually saw a lot of, you see a lot of Instagram videos on this, right? If it's not the hazam, it's the ship, right? The sandals being thrown at people, and people make humors about that, and I don't know about your experience, but I mean, even within our family, but even with other close friends, you always hear about people, unfortunately, sometimes talking negative about parents and how they did this and they did that, and my parents made me this way, um. And that made me really reflect on that, right? Because we all have had our really bad moments as human beings and as parents. But we've also had our good moments. And it always made me wonder, why do people always focus on the negative? Why do you think that is? Like, that they always think, oh my God, I'm this way because of my mom. I'm this way because of my dad.
Yeah, I think that human beings are just naturally prone to being negative, and it doesn't just apply to the way that they view the way that they are raised. I think it just applies to everything, down to how they view themselves, how they view others, how they view their experiences. People tend to just focus on the things that they don't have, the things that they didn't like, and oftentimes forget to focus on the rest of the pie, everything that they did have, everything that they were privileged to experience, and even the the benefits of maybe some of the bad experiences that they went through. Um, so I think that's just how we are. Personally, I'm grateful for all of my experiences, and I know about your experiences. I watched you go through the old traditional way of being raised in Arab country, and that was pretty. That was pretty. I mean, you're one tough dude. I went through a little bit of it, but definitely nowhere as much as you.
Yeah,
Um,
and I appreciate that. And it's funny because so as I've grown, I've been very blessed, right? Alhamdulillah, I've become, a very, what I consider to be a relatively educated person, and that when I became a neurosurgeon, one thing that always blew my mind is I wanted to understand human behavior, what you just said on, what you exactly just discussed. And it was really interesting because unfortunately you see this across culture, right? It doesn't matter where people grew up, what kind of faith they have, what kind of religion they have, what skin color they have. I feel like unfortunately a lot of people fall into this trap of playing the victim, right? And they always play the victim almost like forever, even as they become an adult. They just keep blaming the past, right? They keep blaming um, their parents. They keep blaming whoever, and that always kind of blew my mind. And like from a neurosurgical perspective, it's interesting, right? There's a part in the brain um, called the amygdala, which you know, works on a lot of different things, but one thing it does is it scans for danger and it helps you interpret, the your environment around you. And then there's another part in the brain called the prefrontal cortex, and that's your executive function. This is what helps you make decisions and act on certain things. And it's really interesting to see how those two work with each other and how garnering sympathy and at least in the brain, can cause what we call like a neural validation, which basically what happens is all of a sudden the brain, because it garners a sympathy, it gets like a dopamine and oxytocin release, two hormones in the brain, which causes people to almost become addicted to it, right? Um, so it's really interesting to me that the brain is almost wired in that way to 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 allow you to fall into this unfortunate, dangerous, what I consider to be a dangerous loop of playing the victim. Um, and it wasn't until I started to make these connections that I started to think to myself, maybe I am making a mistake, right? By sitting here and just blaming instead of allowing myself to grow. And this is what it's about, right? This is why you and I have these talks whenever we can, and this is why and I feel very lucky, right? I've been very blessed not to have a sister like you to be able to talk about things like this, and I've also been very lucky to talk to some of my other, our other siblings about it, and some very close friends and very close family members to realize we have to be careful, right? We don't want to play that victim role. We want to use our brain. We want to grow, right? We want to make sure we keep growing over the years, um, and not let the past define us. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
That is really great. I've never had anyone break it down like that scientifically, what exactly happens in the brain, the reasons behind why we are the way we are. I think that's extremely interesting. I did not know that there was a reward system for self victimization, which I agree is a huge problem. And I'm interested because I wonder if that also plays into things like anger, PTSD, and if those behaviors enable um, certain responses like that. But I think this is going to be a beneficial podcast. not just for the audience, but I think for like myself as well. I think that this is a topic that most I don't think I've ever heard anyone really talk about the self confrontation of victimization. So that's really that's good to know that there's actually a physical reason behind why we tend to be negative and oh that's not fair and so yeah I wonder doctor is that do PTSD and anger and these things also play into that system that you talk about regarding the amygdala and uh, please
So
yeah educate us on that.
yeah, no, I mean that's a whole separate podcast by itself, right? I mean, yes, some basis of that is true. It is related, but it's not completely related. But you really hit the nail on something really important. It's that yes, there is at times scientific explanation to some of these things, but also at times there isn't scientific explanation for a lot of things, right? For as much as we understand about the brain, we probably understand extremely little, right? And every day something new comes up and something different comes up. And so I think it's really important for us to try to understand as much of this as we can um, from a scientific perspective. And I'm not trying to change your question. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't fall into a trap, right? Because you never want to be somebody that's ultra one thing, right? Because you can get trapped, right? You can get trapped into something because if all I say is this is all just chemicals in the brain, and this should be solved just by pills, well, I don't agree with that. I actually don't think that's actually smart, and I'm actually very anti medications on a lot of different things, for instance, because there's a lot of good alternatives out there. Prime example, depression. When I did my psych rotation, it was very interesting for me to go and rotate with psychiatrists that treated things like PTSD and all these things and only used medication because to them this was a neurochemical issue. And then I saw the other end of the spectrum where you had some people that said, no, this is a behavioral problem at its core. And they use things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think you have some experience with during your psych rotations. And we had talked about that a long time ago. And it's amazing. Cognitive behavioral therapy sometimes can be just as good for certain patients as giving them medications. And it's amazing how well it works. And then you get other people that go another type of treatment, which is like electroconvulsive therapy, right? And I know we're getting off topic because we're talking about parents, but I just think it's important that we mention that some of these things. And then you get another type of treatments, like something that I would used to do surgically is deep brain stimulation, where we would go in and put these wires in the brain and hook it up to a battery and literally electrically stimulate the brain to help control everything from tremors to behaviors. So the short answer is I don't have the exact explanation, but I also want to make sure we understand that there's not necessarily always a one point of view, right? This is why it's so important to have a very moderate overview of everything and make sure we look at all of the options, which, for us, you and I, especially in our faith, right? In Islam, we always talk about how important moderation is. Our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to always give us all these hadiths about how important it is and how this is very it's a good way to be this way and it's a good way to be forgiving. I don't know. Hopefully that answers kind of your question. I just want to make sure I broach that
Yeah.
topic because I don't want to fall into that, right? Because I've seen that, especially in medical school, and that always bothered me. I didn't like that either when people kind of just took it there because there's a lot more to this than just the neurochemicals, or at least as far as we know so far.
Yeah, there is, thank you so much for that really thorough explanation and your beautifully articulated opinions. I definitely think that we could go a whole bunch of different ways with this, but I I have to say that one thing I am grateful for with my personal upbringing is that maybe it has something to do with mental health being something that is just kind of negatively perceived. We don't,
Oh yeah, it's
kids
stigmatized
care.
for sure.
It's stigma. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you, doctor. And so I'm grateful for that. That our parents, they were against medications as well, and I'm so grateful for that, because nowadays what I'm seeing, especially with the new ways of the world now, women are working and men are working, both parents are working, and there's kind of less attention on the kids, and there is more depression and more prescribing of different kinds of medications. And along with that comes just terrible side effects that I've seen for myself. From I really I agree with you. I
Oh,
don't
it's scary, right? I
yeah.
agree. I've seen horrible side effects. I'm not trying to say that medication doesn't have a role. It absolutely has some role. And there are certain people that do need it and can benefit from it, but we have to be careful. And it's funny that you talked about that, just tying it into parenting. Here's another new medication that I'm seeing that is really scaring me. And it's the use of electronics to treat people. What I mean by that, you get a parent, like you said, that's busy. Mom is busy, dad is busy, whoever in the house is busy, because sometimes you get multi-generation homes, right, with mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and uncle, aunt. um Especially with some of the economy, people having to live with each other, save money. But you get a kid who's energetic, wants to learn, wants this, and you just, to keep him quiet, you give him an iPad to play on it, and it works. I mean, there's no fighting it. You give a kid an iPad, you could keep him quiet for hours at a time. But are we causing more harm than good? And I definitely feel like we are causing harm, and I've always felt that way. And if you look at some of the new information that's coming out, some of the new research has now proven that some of these kids that played on iPads, I can't remember the exact ages because it's been a while since I read the article, but I want to say they looked at kids up to the age 6 or 7, that some of them had up to 30% less myelination in the brain. So myelin is a fat that wraps around nerves, that helps electricity basically conduct in the brain properly. They have 30% less myelination than their counterpart that were not exposed to as much iPad and whatever electronic device they were using, which is crazy because, and as you know, we look at things like demyelinating disease, which is diseases where you lose myelin through whatever pathology. Um, and these are horrible diseases, like multiple sclerosis. These are horrible diseases. And sometimes they don't lose up to 30%. They lose even less than that. So this should be sounding the alarms that what we're doing is actually hurting our kids.
Wow.
I know it terrifies me. There was one article I read that showed that this is the first time in modern recorded history where the new generation, so our kids overall as a general, have a lower IQ than the previous generation, and that's never happened in modern recorded history. It's always the next generation is average IQ is a little higher, but not this new generation that's coming out. So people are not just using chemicals. Now they're using electronics to affect the brain and hurt, unfortunately, without realizing it, they were hurting people. And there's countries now, like in Switzerland, I think it was last year that they actually came out and said, we're no longer allowing iPads in schools for kids. They're going back to paper and pen. Isn't that crazy?
That's great. See, and that is really interesting that you say that. Now, I wonder, I heard one teacher say this during an orientation meeting, um, and she said that not all screen time is the same, and basically they were trying to encourage the use of electronic ways of educating. There's this new one out there called iReady, which kids, they sit in front of a screen for I think they're required to do at least 1 hour minimum a week for these math lessons, reading, language arts. And I wonder, does that do you think, from your experience and your knowledge, would you think that that's true, that not all screen time is the same, or do you think that it doesn't matter?
So, I mean, as far as I know, there aren't any clear research to differentiate between good screen time versus bad screen time per se. Again, I don't treat kids. I mean, this is based on just, psych readings I do and extrapolating from what I know about adult neurophysiology. But generally speaking, the recommendation is, especially for kids, I think age 2 to 5 or 2 to 6, is you should limit them to 1 hour of daily, whether it's video chatting, playing on the iPad or whatever, no more than 1 hour a day. That's it. The recommendation is described as high quality programming. So maybe that falls under what you just asked, like something that's actually high quality. Older than 6, I'm not sure that there's actually clear recommendations out there. Um, but it comes down to common sense too. Like, when kids get older, um, if we just teach them the easy way to get an answer, there's going to be no critical thinking, right? So it's just a tool. Just like when you and I were growing up and computers started to become more of a common household item and started to get a little more cheaper, even then we never used it to substitute everything that we're doing. I mean, nowadays you have kids that are going online using artificial intelligence to write essays and to solve their homework, their math problems. And yeah, it's neat that that's out there, but that doesn't solve the underlying issue, which is these human beings need critical thinking skills, so that they can succeed in life, right? So they can succeed with each other, so they can have meaningful conversations like what you and I are doing right now. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Okay, so we've been focusing on kids. When you look at adults, because I saw a lot more adults, when you look at geriatric people, there's always that famous line they'll say, don't ever retire, because if you retire, you'll die in 10 years or less. And anecdotally, we've all known someone, right, that was so highly functional and all of a sudden they retire. And next thing you know, you hear, oh my God, they passed away a year later or 2 years later or 3 years later. Um, and there's people that have tried to look at that and they've actually found that internal satisfaction is extremely important for growth and for self-worth. And so imagine if that adult that's now 80 years old, 70 years old, 60 years old didn't get a chance to develop that as a child. What are they going to do until their adulthood? Right? If they don't have that critical thinking to be able to understand, I like this because, or I like to talk about this because, um, even screen time, as addictive as it is, it loses its taste after a while, right? Or otherwise, you all you have is a zombie. So, and it goes back to what you and I talked about. How do we raise a successful child that's gonna appreciate things in life? That's gonna, inshallah, grow up to be not just successful, but also have a meaningful world life experience that they not only for themselves, but also for their next generation, for their children.
Yeah, that was um, really insightful. I think that we both know, going back to the kids for a moment, I have seen those guideline recommendations for the 1 hour of high quality screen time, but we both know that parents see that and then and they just switch it out with anything. Okay, well, it's an hour, or maybe they just completely ignore that at all. We're talking about raising kids in today's age with inflation and increased prices and increased demands, and how do you do it? And that's really scary, to see, to even imagine what that could mean for these children when they're in their old age, and
Mhm.
how this is going to impact them. So this is a serious issue. um, I will say that maybe we had some video games growing up. We played some video games, um, but it's nothing like it is today. It's nothing like it is today. So
Yeah, I hear you. It's definitely not, and it's hard. Like, by no means am I saying it's easy. All I'm saying is we need to recognize as parents the problem, right? And part of it falls on us, and obviously part of it falls on society as a whole. But the problem is we can't sit here and play the blame game, because just like some people blame their parents, oh, they did this to me, they hit me, they beat me, they yelled at me. all you're doing is becoming the victim, right? It's society's fault. It's this person's fault. And going back to that, we have to be careful, right? We don't want to play the victim. We want to just hopefully work towards a solution. And I'm not saying we're going to find the solution in our short talk, but I think the first step, to any journey is the first step. Like, so maybe it's okay, I'm going to commit to, you know what? We're going to maximum set a timer of no more than 1 hour a day of whatever these electronic devices are, whether it's video games, YouTube, whatever it is, okay, that you feel is okay for your family because you're the parent, you get to decide. Well, how are you going to fill that time? So many things. It's still pretty cheap to get a piece of cardboard, crayon, pens, and just give it to the kid and tell them draw and just let their imagination and let the brain do what it was designed to do and figure it out, and then after they draw something, use that same paper and fold it into something, or whatever, make a paper airplane, all the silly things that we used to play with and do that are not as expensive as some of us think. And I hear what you're saying, everything is expensive nowadays, it's hard, but there's still thankfully some options, like, hey, it's the weekend, I have work to do, but these kids need to do something, go to a park. Even if you have to take your laptop with you and work on your things and let your kids run around,
Oh yeah. You
go.
remember when we were little, we used to, I mean, we practically lived outside. I mean, we would get water guns, water balloons, and just knock on every door to get whatever kids we could to do like a water war. It was like a neighborhood water war. Um,
Yeah, and you know what? We have to encourage our kids to do similar things. It's funny you say that. So I was at a park with my son, and actually and my daughter too. And I've seen both these happen to them. But more recently, it happened with my son, and he was like, "There's all these kids playing," and I was like, "Oh, go talk to them." And he was like, "I'm shy." And it was really interesting for me to hear him say that because he's never really been shy. So there was different ways to deal with it. The way I chose to deal with it, I was like, "What are you talking about? You're not shy. You're the least shy person in the world. Don't be silly. Go up there, go tell them your name and ask them what their name is and what do they like to do. And if you just want to be friends," I said, "That's all you have to say." And and I even taught him this trick that I heard a long time ago. Whatever that kid's name is, when they say hello to you, make up a name. Give me a name of anybody.
Abdullah.
Okay. Hey, wow, that's a great name. I've never heard such a pretty name before. I mean, imagine how nice that is for that person to hear that because their name is something, it's like the one thing you hear the most of. It's the one thing you associate with yourself at all times. Imagine if somebody you never met gives you that compliment. Wow, that's such a pretty name. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything from Mike to Abdullah. Just say hello and just start talking and start playing. And 45 minutes later, I couldn't get these kids apart. They just kept playing, running on swings, doing all this stuff. Um, all they needed was that little shove, right? And will my kid ever remember that moment? Probably not. And it doesn't matter if he does. All that matters is that experience that he realized it's not hard to meet people. And and you know what? I still use the same simple schoolyard skill to meet people when I go to a different area. Like, recently I flew out to look at a city because I'm looking at a business I want to start, and I ran into complete strangers, and I did the same thing. Hey, what's your name? And we just started talking, and I was like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I got so much information from that 15-minute encounter than I did talking to a consultant that I paid money to. So it's
That is really
so
interesting.
we have to push our kids to go out, whatever it is, and we have to teach them by example, right? How do you get them out of their comfort zone? Unfortunately, that means that we have to do get out of our comfort zone because you can tell your kids a million things. That's not the way they learn. It took me years to figure that out. I mean, you do need to tell them, but believe it or not, the best way kids learn is through example. If I tell my kids, don't smoke, and I'm sitting there, I'm smoking all day, what do you think they're going to do? They're eventually going to smoke. And I've seen this growing up, and it's bad. I mean, but that is the best way to teach people. If I yell at my kids and I tell them don't ever, drive and text and drive at the same time, but I'm sitting there with my phone texting and looking at stuff, what do you think they're going to do?
Right. By the way, what you're just full of so many facts and um, so much knowledge. I love this conversation. But what you said about the name, how people feel when you compliment their name. I'm not sure if you ever knew this about me, but whenever I meet someone, I am actually highly interested in what their name is, what it means. Um, I love learning those things. And when I meet someone, I will usually ask them, "Oh, what's your name?" And "Oh, what does that mean?" And usually they don't know, and then we figure it out, and it's like a just a great way to connect and establish rapport and friendship. And I would like to add. If the audience, the third chair, you guys continue listening to our podcasts, maybe one day we will introduce our own names, but for the time being, we're gonna keep it undercover. So
Well,
keep
I think the main reason for that too is we don't want this to be about us, right? We really want this to be about what everybody's experiencing. I mean, we've all had this problem with parenting, for instance, to go back to today's topic. And that's part of the reason is we really want this to be about the third chair, you people. And eventually what I'm hoping is we can have a way for people to call into these and get other people's opinions and their experiences, because that's how you learn.
And we're lucky to have an expert here too. It's not AI, these are real human beings that are educated with real life experiences. And we would definitely love to hear in the comments what other topics the third chair would like to hear about or discuss. We love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for joining us on our first pilot episode. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, and I appreciate my sister sitting there and giving us such an amazing insightful things. I just want to add with one last statement that I was hoping we'd talk about, we didn't get a chance to, is the importance of forgiveness. Okay, so no, when I say don't focus on the bad, it doesn't mean that you forget. We acknowledge that there's some hurt out there, but it's important to just forgive, clear your heart, and move forward with life.
I think that should be the next episode's topic is forgiveness, and we can tie it back into the self-victimization and parenting and all of these things. I think we've set ourselves up for episode 2.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.